Welcome back, Scratchers. At this point, we have our P-38 flying, animated, and shooting. It'd be nice to have something to shoot at. So it's time to start adding our enemies. So pick one of these sprites, zero sprites, to be your first enemy. I'm going to go ahead and use the blue zero. And we want this zero to appear at the top of the screen, somewhere along the top of the screen. Now, Scratch uses the Cartesian coordinate system, and the top of the screen is at positive 180 on the y-axis, the bottom is at negative 180, the left side is negative 240, and the right side is 240. This is also basically 480 by 260 is the total size of the stage. So if we want something to appear at the top, we need to put it at those particular coordinates. So if we look in the motion blocks, we can have a go to x and y. And we know that the y, like we said, needs to be at the very top of the screen, which is at 180. Now the x position is where it appears from left to right here. We actually could let that be anywhere within that screen. And if we want it to be different every time, we can actually use a random number. So go to the operators and pick random. And again, we want that to appear anywhere on the screen. That means it could be anywhere from negative 240 to positive 240. Let's go ahead and use negative 240 and positive 240. And then we'd want it to appear once it's at that position. The question is, when do we want to trigger this? Well, for right now, I'm just going to use the when green flag is clicked so that we can actually see it pop in there. That should put us at random 240 to 40. And notice it doesn't seem like we're popping in there. Oh, because I'm using a hide instead of a show. So double check that we do this correctly. Try it again, and boom, there's our sprite. If I do it again, he appears at a different random position, but he's always appearing at the top of the screen. And now we want him to fly down the screen. And this is basically the same trick that we used with our bullets. So this should be familiar. We do the repeat until, and then in the motion blocks, we're going to change the y value. But because we want him to fly downwards, that y value needs to be negative. So there you can see that maybe is a little faster than we want him to fly by. So maybe we crank that down a little bit, maybe negative 5. Notice too that his propeller is spinning, but we have again 3 costumes. So we can basically do the same trick that we did with our P-38, where we say, let's go ahead and make sure that we're just changing that costume for that. Now if we run that again, now it looks like he's flying downwards, but notice he gets stuck at the bottom. We don't have a condition here. We need to add one. Now what we did with the bullets is we did this touching and set it to the edge. So when we touch the edge, we would disappear. But if we do that, notice that our plane never actually starts flying downwards. That's because as soon as we show up, we check we're touching an edge because we're actually touching the top edge. So even though this worked well for the bullets, we can't use it here because we're going to start when we first appear. We will be touching an edge. So how else could we know that we reached the bottom of the stage? Well, if we look at our position, if we reach negative 180, that means that we are at the bottom of the stage. So we could use a Boolean block and do a comparison to say, are we at the bottom, so negative 180, and we can put into that, go back to our motion blocks, we have a reporter for what our current y position is. We can actually watch that. If I check this box and see the blue zero's y position, we start it, notice that it's going downwards, it's smaller and smaller. When it gets to negative 180, we stop moving because we've reached the bottom of the screen. So that strategy will work for us. But we need to go ahead and hide our zero when we reach the bottom. There we go. Now, there is a downside to this approach. Like we talked about with bullets, we can only ever have one zero on the screen if we're using the zero itself. But we could swap this for a clone. and the same with the propeller animation. So if I start as a clone, start spinning that propeller, and when I reach the bottom, we want to, again, like we talked about, we always want to clean up our clones. We want to delete the clone. That will also stop that block because the delete the clone actually stops everything that's running on the clone. So that'll get us our clone. We have to go ahead and now we can create a couple. So we've got a couple flying down, they disappear. We can have as many as we want. Now we can do waves of enemies, which is much more interesting. So we'll go ahead and pull this create clone myself out. And as long as the game is running, we want to create clones. Now this is actually a little dangerous. You can see we get a huge wave of enemies. This is probably way more than we need, although it is kind of fun. So what we'll do is we'll add a little wait, a little pause. Now we have the plane coming every second. If we want that to be a little more random, we can pick a random number, and maybe every 1 to 10 seconds. That'll really slow them down. Maybe every 1 to 3 if we want them to come a little more frequently. But we should have clones popping in. Because that can be 1 to 0, we can actually get some a little more tightly coupled. You could even set this to 0 and say, okay, I can have 2 actually appear at the same time potentially. So that gives us some enemies that we can then interact or will soon be able to interact with. And that's really our next step is now we can fire, now we have enemies. Let's think about what we want to have happen next.